I woke up on the floor of my own garage on a Wednesday evening in March, and the first thing I saw was the underside of my workbench. The second thing I saw was my left hand, still holding a socket wrench, shaking so badly the metal was tapping against the concrete like a tiny broken bell. The third thing I saw, and this is the one that changed everything, was my wife's car pulling out of the driveway through the gap under the garage door. She was leaving. I was having a stroke, and she had somewhere more important to be. Welcome back to Dad's Honest Revenge. Settle in, grab your coffee, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to do the right thing. They just didn't. Leave a comment and make sure you subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to hear this one through. Let me back up. My name is Warren. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years as a mechanical engineer for a firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I retired 2 years ago with a full pension, a 4-bedroom house that I'd paid off in 22 years, and a marriage that I believed, with every fiber of my being, was the one thing in my life I had gotten absolutely right. I was wrong about that last part. But we'll get there. The stroke happened while I was replacing a brake caliper on my grandson's bicycle. A simple job. 20 minutes, tops. I had the bike flipped upside down on my workbench, classic rock playing from the little radio I've had since 1994, and a cold glass of sweet tea sitting on the shelf beside me. It was the kind of evening I loved. Quiet, hands-on work. No meetings, no deadlines, just a man and a task, and the satisfaction of making something work again. Then the wrench got heavy. Not gradually. All at once, like someone had swapped it for a barbell while I wasn't looking. My left arm went numb from the shoulder down. The garage tilted sideways, or I tilted sideways, and the concrete came up to meet me with the kind of authority that concrete has always been known for. I remember lying there thinking very clearly, very calmly, this is a stroke. I knew the signs. My father had died of one at 58. I had read every pamphlet, attended every screening, taken every aspirin. And here I was, face down in my own garage, watching my wife's silver Lexus back out of the driveway at 6:47 on a Wednesday evening. She had told me 20 minutes earlier that she was meeting her sister for dinner. Her sister who lived 45 minutes away. Her sister who, as I would later learn, was not at dinner that night or any of the other nights my wife had claimed to be with her over the past 14 months. My neighbor found me. Carl Perkins, 70 years old, Vietnam veteran. A man who waters his lawn at mathematically precise intervals. And once returned a library book 17 years late because, and I quote, it bothered him. Carl saw my garage light on and the door half open and came over to ask if I had a Phillips head screwdriver he could borrow. Instead, he found me on the floor, conscious but unable to speak, with the left side of my face doing something it had never done before. Carl called 911. Then he called my wife. She didn't answer. He called again. No answer. He called a third time, and she picked up on the last ring. And Carl, bless that man's directness, said 4 words. Warren's had a stroke. I found out later, much later, what happened next. She told Carl she was 30 minutes away. She asked if the paramedics were coming. Carl said yes. She said she'd meet us at the hospital. She did not meet us at the hospital. Not that night. Not the next morning. She arrived at Mercy General at 2:15 the following afternoon, 18 hours after I'd been admitted, carrying a small arrangement of flowers from the grocery store and wearing the same clothes she'd had on the night before. I know this because my daughter told me. My daughter, who had driven 3 hours from Raleigh the moment Carl called her, who had slept in the chair beside my bed, who had been there when I opened my eyes and tried to say her name, and couldn't, because the left side of my mouth wasn't cooperating yet. My daughter, who looked at her mother walk in at 2:15 inches the afternoon and said nothing, but whose face said everything. I spent 11 days in the hospital. The stroke had affected my speech and my left side mobility. Dr. Anand, my neurologist, a man who spoke with the patience of someone who explains things for a living and has made peace with repeating himself, told me I was fortunate. The blockage had been caught relatively early. With therapy, I would recover most function. Most. Not all. Most. My wife visited 4 times in 11 days. I counted, not because I was keeping score, because when you're lying in a hospital bed and the only things you can do are think and count ceiling tiles, you notice who walks through the door and how often. Visit 1, the grocery store flowers. Visit 2, a Thursday, 20 minutes, she had a hair appointment. Visit 3, Saturday. She brought my grandson, which was genuinely lovely, and I almost forgave everything in that moment. Because watching a 4-year-old try to climb into a hospital bed is the purest form of medicine that exists. Visit 4, the day before I was discharged. She brought a suitcase of clothes for me to wear home and asked me 3 times if I wanted her to pick up anything specific from the store. She was performing the choreography of a caring wife, every gesture technically correct but empty, in the way that only someone paying very close attention would notice. I was paying very close attention. The man who woke up from that stroke was not entirely the same man who went down on the garage floor. Something had clarified. Like a dirty window someone had finally wiped clean. I could see things now. Patterns I'd been looking at for years without actually seeing. My buddy Ray came to visit me on day 6. Raymond Hutchins. We'd been friends since our daughters played softball together 22 years ago. Ray was the kind of man who showed up. Funerals, hospital rooms, flat tires at midnight. If you called Ray, Ray came. That was his whole personality, and it was more than enough. He walked in carrying a paper bag from the barbecue place we'd been going to for 15 years, set it on the bedside table, pulled up a chair, and looked at me with the expression of a man who was carrying something he didn't want to carry. "How you feeling, old man?" he said. "Like the left side of my body went on vacation without telling me," I said. My speech was still slow, a little slurred, but improving. Ray didn't flinch at it. Another thing about Ray, he never made you feel like your problems were his discomfort. We talked for a while. Normal things. His truck needed new shocks. His wife had started a sourdough phase that was taking over the kitchen. His oldest had just made partner at her law firm. Good things. Easy things. Then the air changed. "Warren?" "Yeah." "Where's Diane?" "She was here yesterday," I said. He nodded. The slow kind. The kind that means something entirely different from agreement. "Ray, what do you know?" He rubbed his hands together, stared at the floor, and exhaled through his nose like a man setting down something heavy. "I know that on the night you had your stroke, your wife's car was parked outside a restaurant in Ballantyne, not near her sister's place. I know because my nephew works valet there. He texted me a picture of the car because he remembered the plate from your driveway. And I know she wasn't eating alone because my nephew said she was with a man he'd seen her with at least 3 other times." The room got very quiet. The heart monitor beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse laughed at something. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Suspected about 5 months. Known for sure since January. It's March, Ray." "I know." His voice cracked. Just barely. I didn't know how to tell a man with a heart condition that his wife was stepping out. "And then you had the stroke, and I sure as hell didn't know how to tell you then. But watching her show up here 4 times in 11 days, while you're lying in this bed, Warren, I can't hold it anymore. I'm sorry." I looked at him. Ray Hutchins, who had never once in 22 years let me down, who was sitting there apologizing for not knowing the right time to deliver the worst news of my life. I reached over with my good hand and squeezed his arm. "You're telling me now," I said. "That's enough." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and pretended he wasn't doing it. I pretended I didn't see. That's what men our age do. We grant each other the dignity of unacknowledged tears. I came home on a Friday. My daughter had set up the house. New handrails in the bathroom. A shower bench. My medications organized in one of those weekly pill containers that make you feel ancient the first time you use one. She'd stocked the fridge, done the laundry, and left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter that said, "Call me every day or I'm moving back in." She was, and remains, the best thing I ever contributed to this world. My wife was there when I got home. Attentive, helpful. She guided me up the front steps like I was made of glass. She made dinner. She asked about my therapy schedule. She did everything right, and none of it felt real. It felt like watching someone rehearse a scene they'd memorized but didn't believe in. I want to tell you that I confronted her that night, that I sat her down and said what I knew and demanded explanations, but I didn't. And here's why. Something happens to you when you survive something that should have killed you. You stop rushing. You stop reacting. The urgency that used to govern every emotion just evaporates, and what's left underneath is patience. Cold, clear, purposeful patience. The kind that doesn't need to shout because it already knows how this ends. So I watched. I recovered. I did my physical therapy 3 times a week, regained most of my speech, got my left hand working well enough to button a shirt again, which felt like winning the Super Bowl the first time I did it without help. And quietly, methodically, in the calm center of a life that looked perfectly normal from the outside. I started making arrangements. First call was to my attorney, Patricia Langford. I'd known Patricia for 20 years. She'd handled our estate planning, our wills, my retirement paperwork. She was the kind of lawyer who wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and spoke in complete, grammatically flawless sentences at all times, even when ordering lunch. I sat in her office on a Tuesday afternoon and closed the door. Patricia, I need to ask you a hypothetical question. There are no hypothetical questions in my office, Warren. Only early ones and late ones. Go ahead. If a man my age wanted to ensure that his assets, his pension, his investments, and his property were structured in a way that protected him in the event of a significant change in marital status, what would that look like? She studied me over those reading glasses for a very long moment. It would look like a man who should have come to see me sooner, she said. But better late than never. Let's get started. What followed was 6 weeks of the most focused, disciplined work of my life. And I say that as a man who once redesigned a failing bridge support system in 48 hours during a hurricane. Patricia was thorough, meticulous. She reviewed every account, every title, every beneficiary designation. The house, which I had purchased before the marriage with money from my father's estate, was in my name. Always had been. My pension, earned over 31 years of work that I had done, was protected under state law. The investment accounts, which I had funded almost entirely from my own earnings, were restructured into a trust that Patricia described as elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. Meanwhile, at home, I was the picture of a recovering husband. I cooked breakfast. I sat on the porch. I waved at Carl, who waved back with the precision of a man who takes neighborly obligations seriously. I asked my wife about her day, and listened to her answers with the attentive focus of a man who was cataloging every detail for a purpose she couldn't imagine. She was still seeing him. I knew this because the patterns hadn't changed. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, she had her book club. Saturday mornings, she went to the farmer's market. She came home from the farmer's market every Saturday without a single vegetable. Not once. In 6 weeks of Saturday farmer's markets, not a single tomato, not a single bunch of kale, nothing. A woman going to a real farmer's market comes home with something. A woman going somewhere else comes home with guilt and a convenient story. I never checked her phone, never followed her, never hired anyone to take photographs. I didn't need to. 33 years of marriage teaches you a woman's rhythms the way a sailor learns the tide. When those rhythms change, you don't need a detective. You need a decision. I made mine. There was one more thing I did during those 6 weeks that I want to tell you about, because it mattered more than the legal work, more than the financial restructuring, more than any of the strategic preparation. I called my daughter. I sat on the back porch on a Sunday afternoon, the sun warm on my face, birds doing what birds do, and I told her everything. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a long silence, and then she said very quietly, "Daddy, I've known something was wrong for 2 years. I just didn't know what." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because you loved her," she said, "and I didn't want to be the one to take that away from you. My daughter, my absolute North Star." She cried. I cried. Then we made a plan, because that's what our family does. We grieve, and then we get organized. If you're still listening and you want to hear how this ends, hit that subscribe button now. Most people watch without subscribing, but it's what keeps these stories coming. Thank you. Truly. Let me tell you about the morning everything landed. It was a Saturday in May. One of those spring mornings in Charlotte where the air smells like cut grass and magnolia. And you can almost convince yourself that everything is fine. Almost. I was up at 5:30. Couldn't sleep. Didn't want to. I showered, shaved, put on a clean polo shirt, and my good khakis, the ones my daughter always said made me look distinguished, which I'm fairly certain is the polite way of saying old but presentable. I made coffee. I scrambled eggs. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup and the morning paper, and I waited. My wife came downstairs at 7:45. Hair done, makeup done, the careful kind of presentable that a Saturday farmer's market does not require. She stopped when she saw me sitting there. "You're up early," she said. "Made eggs," I said. "Sit. Eat before you go." She hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then she smiled and sat down, and we ate breakfast together across from each other at the kitchen table we'd shared for 33 years. I poured her coffee. She thanked me. We talked about the weather, about our grandson's preschool play, about the neighbor's new fence. Normal Saturday conversation. Perfectly calibrated. Entirely hollow. She left at 8:30, kissed me on the forehead, said she'd be back by noon. I watched her car disappear around the corner. Then I picked up my phone and called Patricia. "It's time," I said. "Everything's been filed," she said. "Whenever you're ready." "I'm ready. I've been ready." I called Ray next. "I need you here at noon," I said. "Park on the street, not the driveway." "You doing what I think you're doing?" "Yeah. I'll be there at 11:30. "Ray." "Yeah. Bring your truck. I might need help moving a few things." She came back at 12:15. I heard 2 car doors close. 2. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Same chair. Same coffee mug. The folder Patricia had prepared was on the table beside me, under a newspaper, casual as anything. The front door opened. My wife walked in first, mid-sentence, something about a parking spot, and behind her, carrying a bottle of wine like a man who thought he was coming for a pleasant afternoon, was the man from the restaurant. I'd never seen him before in person. He was younger than me, probably mid-50s, good-looking in a generic catalog sort of way, silver at the temples, confident posture. The kind of man who was used to walking into rooms and being welcomed. He was not going to be welcomed today. They turned the corner into the kitchen. My wife saw me and stopped. The man behind her nearly walked into her back. "Hey there," I said pleasantly. "Didn't expect company. But there's coffee if you'd like some." My wife's face went through something I can only describe as a system crash. Every expression she knew tried to load at once, and for about 3 seconds nothing worked at all. "Warren," she started. "I know who he is," I said. Not harsh, not loud. The way you say something when you want the other person to understand that the conversation they were expecting is not the conversation they're going to have. "Please, both of you, sit down. I've been wanting to have this talk for a while." The man looked at my wife. My wife looked at the table. They sat. I pulled the folder from under the newspaper and opened it. Slowly, because I had learned, through 63 years of living, and one very educational near-death experience, that patience is its own kind of power. "These are divorce papers," I said, "filed 9 days ago. My attorney, Patricia Langford, some of you may remember her from our estate planning meetings, has been working on this for 6 weeks. Everything is documented, legal, and finalized on my end." I slid a copy across to my wife. Her hands were shaking when she picked it up. "The house," I continued, "was purchased with my inheritance before our marriage. It remains in my name. Patricia confirmed this with the county records. My pension is protected under North Carolina law as separate property. The investment accounts have been restructured into a trust." I paused, took a sip of coffee. Good coffee. I'd used the expensive beans. A man should have good coffee on an important morning. "The joint checking account has enough to cover your expenses through July. After that, your attorney will coordinate with Patricia on the settlement. I've been fair. I want you to know that. 33 years warrants fairness, even when fairness wasn't returned to me." My wife looked up from the papers. Her eyes were wet. "Warren, how long have you known?" "Long enough," I said. "Long enough to make sure I did this the right way instead of the angry way." Then I turned to the man. He hadn't moved since sitting down. His hands were flat on the table, very still. The bottle of wine sat between us like the world's most inappropriate centerpiece. "I don't know you," I said, "and I have no particular interest in knowing you. But I want you to understand something. That woman you've been spending time with is the mother of my daughter and the grandmother of my grandson. She is not a toy. She is not an adventure. She is a woman who made a choice, and so did you, and choices have weight. I hope you're prepared to carry yours." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I'm sorry," he said. "I believe you are," I said. "Right now, in this moment, sitting in my kitchen, I believe you are genuinely sorry. Whether that lasts past my driveway is not my concern." My wife started crying. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep when a person realizes that the life they thought they had, the safe one, the comfortable one, the one with a husband who cooked breakfast and fixed bicycles and never asked hard questions, is ending. Not with an explosion. With paperwork. "You planned all of this," she said. "I had 6 weeks in this house recovering from a stroke," I said. "A stroke I had on the garage floor while you were at a restaurant in Ballantyne with the man sitting next to you. I had a lot of time to think." She flinched. That one landed. I hadn't planned it as a weapon. It was just the truth. And the truth, when it finally arrives after being delayed for a long time, has its own kind of force. I didn't know about the stroke when, you knew by 7:15 that evening, Carl called you 3 times. You showed up 18 hours later with grocery store flowers. Silence. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I said. I'm saying it because someone needed to say it, and I've decided that someone is me. You left me on that garage floor, not literally. I understand that, but in every way that matters, you left. And the man who got up from that floor is not the man who's going to pretend he didn't notice. The man left first. He took the wine with him, which I thought was a nice touch. My wife stayed. We sat at that kitchen table for another hour, and we had the most honest conversation of our entire marriage. She told me when it started. I told her when I knew. She asked me if there was any chance of fixing this. I told her no, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just clarity. I loved you for 33 years, I said. I loved you well, and the hardest part of this isn't losing you. It's realizing I lost you a long time ago, and was the last one to find out. She left at 2 o'clock. I stood at the kitchen window and watched her pull away. Then I walked to the front door and opened it, and Ray was sitting on my porch steps, eating a sandwich, because of course he was. How'd it go? He asked. It's done, I said. He nodded, stood up, brushed the crumbs off his jeans. You need anything? Yeah, I said. I need you to help me move that workbench in the garage. I'm reorganizing. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he grinned, the kind of grin that a 22-year friendship earns, and said, Brother, I thought you'd never ask. We spent the rest of the afternoon in my garage, moving things, sorting tools, throwing away the junk I'd been keeping for decades out of habit. Carl came over at some point, without being asked, and started helping. He didn't ask what happened. He just picked up a box and said, Where do you want this? Because that's what neighbors like Carl do. My daughter called at 6. I told her everything. She was quiet for a long time. Are you okay, Daddy? I'm better than okay, I said. I'm honest. For the first time in a long time, everything around me is honest. She drove down the next morning. She stayed for a week. We cooked together, walked together, sat on the porch together, and watched my grandson chase fireflies in the yard. She didn't ask me if I was sad. She could see that I was sometimes in the quiet moments. But she could also see that underneath the sadness was something solid, something that had been there all along but had been buried under years of accommodation and avoidance, and the kind of love that asks nothing and therefore notices nothing. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Clean. Fair. Patricia made sure of it. My wife got what the law entitled her to and not a penny more. She moved to a condo on the other side of town. I hear she's still seeing the man from the restaurant. I don't think about it much. That's not my story anymore. I kept the house, repainted the bedroom, got a new mattress, bought a better grill, the kind with 4 burners and a smoker attachment that Ray described as irresponsible, and then immediately asked to use. I joined a woodworking class at the community center. I'm terrible at it. The instructor, a retired carpenter named Gene, told me my dovetail joints looked like they were made by an angry child. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. It was the best criticism I've ever received. My grandson comes over every other weekend. We fix things in the garage together. He hands me tools with the seriousness of a surgeon's assistant and calls everything a wrench regardless of what it actually is. Last Saturday, he looked up at me while I was tightening a bolt and said, Grandpa, are you happy? I put the wrench down. I looked at that boy 4 years old, asking a question with more emotional precision than most adults manage in a lifetime. Yeah, buddy, I said. Grandpa's happy. And I meant it. Not the performative kind of happy. Not the kind you put on like a coat because someone's watching. The real kind. The kind that settles into your bones after you've been through something that stripped everything away and left only what was true. They tell you that surviving a stroke is a second chance at life. That's not wrong, but it's not quite right either. It's not a second chance, it's a correction. A forced, brutal, unwelcome correction that takes everything you thought you knew and holds it up to the light and shows you where the cracks were all along. I collapsed on my garage floor on a Wednesday in March. My neighbor saved my life. My wife didn't come. And the man who got up from that floor, slowly, painfully, one therapy session at a time, decided that he was done living in a house full of lies and calling it love. I am 63 years old. I have a good grill, a good friend, a great daughter, the world's best grandson, and a garage that is finally, for the first time in 33 years, organized exactly the way I wanted. And that, my friends, is more than enough. If you enjoyed this story, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more real, honest, and family-rooted stories. We read every single comment, so drop yours below. And as always, thank you for being here. It means more than you know.